Computer. Boom. Hey, folks, welcome back to the Land Fixer podcast. I'm your host, Logan Swanson, and here we talk about all things land. We have another exciting guest today. We're talking with Seth Drehle-Ewan in the house. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Cool, cool. Yeah. As usual, folks, if you are interested in buying or selling land, go to primelandexchange.com and tell me what you're trying to do. I can help you out. If you need funding for your land flips, your land subdivision projects, anything like that, check us out at landpartnerfunding.com. And as usual, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, kind of all over the place. Um, and we'll get right into it. Seth, welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up on a weird land podcast and podcast Landia?
Yeah, so Logan invited me, but I've been in the land flipping space since 2017, and I do it with my brother. We run DeBro's Land and have done deals all across the country, probably 15 different states. And in the last couple of years, we've switched up and have dialed into a one market, one region of the country, and have gone into minor and exempt subdivides. And we're going to talk about that and many other things today. So looking
Well,
forward to it.
perfect. I want to start with what you first said, like what you just said. Why would you go from being this big, booming, expansive business in all these different areas to one? That's boring. Why would you do that?
I like I've done the model of big and everywhere, and it's great to say, hey, we're a national company. But the reality is you don't get intimate. You don't know the markets as well if you're not intimate in that market. I like the inch deep or inch wide and mile deep instead of the mile wide and an inch deep sort of method. And you have to do both to figure out which one you like. And I've found that the inch deep or sorry, mile deep and an inch wide is so much better because you get to know the people, you get to know how things are done, the realtors, the surveyors, all the people that you work with on a much, much deeper level.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I had the exact same experience. Um, I'm trying to think. Probably 3 years ago, we were sending mail to like five, six, 7 states a month. I mean, we were just nuts. But you fall into this delusion. When did you start buying and selling?
In 2017.
Okay, so we were 2018. So you couldn't miss, dude. When we in the heyday, we got
Yeah.
all this false confidence because you could mail pretty much any county and pull some deals out of it, and there was
Oh,
plenty of
yeah.
money to go around, and everything was smooth and easy. Um,
Um,
up until I had land in 20 different states and things slowed down and I was trying to
yeah.
sell 100 properties in it. Oh my
Yeah, I know the
gosh.
feeling.
Yeah, I've had a number of mistakes. I actually have an episode where I just cover some of my most expensive mistakes, and we haven't actually lost money anywhere yet. Um, but I do
Good
remember I
for
bought
you.
three. Yeah, we bought 3 lots next to what looked like a beautiful lake in Northern California, Lake Shastina, and
Okay.
only to find out that it has completely dried up and the aerial footage just had not been updated yet. So we bought like land in the community next to a crater, effectively.
Oh, goodness.
Oh yeah.
That's funny.
So I think we broke even. But well, do you have any cool, fun mistakes that you like to or expensive issues that you encountered when you were trying to span the whole country?
Yeah, I would say it's a matter of time before you lose money in this business. You got to lose money in business at some point. I love Warren Buffett. He says, never lose money or make money and never lose money, something like that. And
Hmm.
that's a nice motto, but the reality is when you're a business, you end up losing money or just breaking even on some deals. But
Hmm.
my favorite deals are always the ones where we're helping people. And it's never a one-way sort of thing. And that's the thing I love about our model now is we actually go after stuff on the MLS. So we don't actually mail anymore. We don't text. We don't do ringless voice. All of that stuff that gets thrown around there in the land flipping space, we don't do any of it anymore. We go after stuff that people are actually interested in getting offers. They're actually trying to attract buyers for their property. And that works in some markets. In other markets, it works the other way. Sometimes in this market right now, we're in a buyer's market, so it works really great. But when we flip it, then we get the other side of that coin too, where now we get hammered on the price and terms and conditions of buying these properties. If I had to pick my favorite deal we ever did, out of the last 7, 8 years that we've been doing this now, it would probably be our deal that we did in northern New Mexico. And I actually have a horror story in northern New Mexico. We've done a lot of deals in New Mexico. So let me give you two. I'll give you a really good one and I'll give you a really disastrous one that I can't even make how bad this deal was. So let's start with the good. The good deal was it was 120 acres, and I want to say it was San Miguel County, New Mexico. And we had a lady that reached out from a campaign we sent out through mail, and she's like, I want to get rid of this. I'm sick and tired of paying taxes, and I want to just get whatever I can for it. And she said, I need $5,000. I was like, okay, well, that seems pretty cheap for 120 acres with forested. Like, it was beautiful. Well, come to find out, she owed $35,000 in back taxes. And how she didn't get this property taken away from her is beyond me, because the tax roll for not paying had gone back like 15 years. So something was like, I don't understand how this one got missed. Although I will say this, if you start looking at tax deeds, there are properties like this all the time. They get put on the
Yeah.
tax roll. And if you're not local, you probably are going to miss it every time, because some of these you have to be in person to go and be able to bid on these properties. So she just wasn't paying the taxes for like 15 years and finally got a letter from us and said, hey, I like these guys. And we always on our letters put our picture of us so they know who we are. We always put brothers and business partners. Sometimes people mix that up, and we get hate mail for that. But we sent this letter. She's like, I liked your guys' picture, and your letter seemed genuine. So what can you do for me? And we ended up closing it. And the initial thought was to sell it for like $250,000. But the
Hmm.
reality is this is New Mexico. Everything doesn't matter the market. New Mexico is a very slow market. It's a very niche market, and you got to find the right buyer with this
Yeah.
particular one, because you actually had to get in through a used forestry road
Hmm.
in order to get to the property. And you definitely need a pickup truck with four-wheel drive. Nothing less than an F-150 is going to get you there. So we had our agent that we knew from the area, and he went out there and he actually said, you know something, Seth, we could get 250,000, but I'll give you $100,000 if you'll sell it to me. And for 30, we were 35 in, we got paid her 5,000, we had a couple thousand for closing. So we were between it all about $43,000. And I said, you know what, let's do it. I don't care. So we ended up selling it to him. He went out there, and a couple weeks later, he's like, okay, let's close. So we closed it with him, and that was one of the fastest deals we ever did. It was just the most bizarre thing that she hadn't paid these taxes for 50, like I've seen a couple years, 5 years, but not 15 years of not paying and still owning the property without a tax, deed buyer coming in and snatching it up. And had they done it, they could have subdivided. There's all kinds of things they could have done. And the really cool thing about this property, when he went on there, the agent that went and bought it went on the property. He got video and pictures. There was an old homestead from the early 1800s on there with original like logs and all of
No
the.
way.
It was absolutely beautiful. It was run down, but I mean, it was absolutely gorgeous. There was still this structure still standing there, and his intention was to fix up the cabin and actually make it functional for him. But the previous owner's like, yeah, I knew there was a cabin there, but like we haven't used it the entire time we've owned it. Like we've owned this property for like 70 years.
Yeah.
So
Super common. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That's really
exactly.
cool. So what's the nightmare story? That's the easy
Oh
win.
God. I call this the Santa Fe one. This wasn't Santa Fe. We got this deal. Was through. I actually can't remember how it came in, but it came in from some lead source. Tried many things over the years, and it was a like 2 to 3 acre parcel in an area just north of Santa Fe, and the average home value I would say in this area is probably 1.5 million. And that's Santa Fe. If you don't know the Santa Fe market, it's very much a niche, highfalutin sort of person that lives there, and the person selling was in a bind. So we thought, conservatively it was worth 150 to 200,000, and it probably would have actually the funny part is we sold it before this whole situation happened. So let's start with buying and then we'll get to the end. So we thought it was worth about 150 to 200. We offered $70,000, and it was in an HOA, and the HOA fees were high. Were probably like $3,000 a year.
Hmm.
So it was about $5,000 in closing costs. So we ended up closing this deal with the title company. And this is very important because in the middle of the deal, the seller wanted to switch title companies. And they said, well, I don't like this one. I want a different one. And we're like, okay, that's kind of weird, but that's fine. I guess we'll switch title companies. So we switched title companies. The other one, no issues. We got the title report back. We got actually had a survey done about 10 years ago. And we closed this property, and the agent that we hired from the area went to check it out. He's like, oh, this is great. Like he went and checked it out before we bought it, but and that's something I highly recommend. Always have someone, whether yourself or
Always.
someone else, go check out the property.
Yes.
So he went out there. He's like, this is great. This is going to sell because you can see off the mountain. And it's a flat property, but you can see flat down into Santa Fe. So it had a gorgeous view down into the valley of Santa Fe. And he said, we're going to sell this, no problem. And if we sell at the right price, this thing will move really quick because there's a lot of people trying to sell stuff for $400,000, $500,000 a lot. If you guys are buying it for 70, you might as well sell it for a decent profit and move on. So we
Yeah.
tried. So we said, well, let's list it for 250. And he said that'll sell it in a heartbeat because everything in the neighborhood that's available and is sold is over 350. So you're already $100,000 under what other people are asking. So it's going to be a steal for someone. So he put a sign in the ground, got it on the MLS, got drone footage, got everything out there. And we had a buyer present themselves within the first weekend because we listed on a Friday, and by Saturday we had a buyer. Saturday morning, we were getting ready to sign a contract. Saturday morning, we got a very distressing phone call from the broker and said, I was just talking with the person that's watching the house next door who supposedly owns this lot and says, what is going on? Why is there a sign in my land? And my heart, as soon as he told me this, my heart dropped. Believe me, we had
Oh,
$75 on the line here. And we had another hundred and some odd $1,000, on top of that we were making on this deal. And come to find out, we ended up talking with this lady. She was a very wonderful lady, but she was a very wealthy lady. She owned this one. This was a three house. She owned the two lots, supposedly next door, different name, because she's using, anonymous trusts and stuff. She owned like stuff. She's like, I own a house in Paris and London and Tokyo and South Africa. And she's like, I travel all the time. So I have people at each of my villas watching my land, watching my house to make sure everything is being taken care of. The gardeners are doing their job, like all the stuff. Like she's a very well-off lady, and she had someone watching the land, saw the sign on the ground, and she called the number on the sign and said, what is going on? And she called the lady that owned it immediately and said, are you selling your land? Because you would have told me that, right? Like that's something you would have told me. So I could watch the cars going by and stuff. She's like, what do you mean? So we ended up, to make a long story short, we ended up having to file a title claim. It took us 45 days. You basically send a letter because the title company that closed it, which is not the title company, well, that's the title company. The underwriter is the one that manages this problem at this
yes.
point. So the title company that we spoke to was speechless. First time it's ever happened. They've been in business for 100 years. Supposedly, this is the first time it's ever happened. I find that hard to believe, but that's what they say. So we dealt with them for about 2 seconds. They said, you got to talk to the underwriter. In this case, it was First American.
Hmm.
So we had to FedEx and overnight a letter that says, hey, this is what happened. And they opened an investigation. They said, okay, yeah, there's a lot of things they missed on verifying the ownership and identity of the person that was supposedly the seller of this fantastic property. And at the end of the day, they ended up paying us back all of the money we put in, all of the closing costs. And then they had to make it right with the actual owner we had to do a quick claim deed back to her. And I would imagine something else happened in the background that we weren't party to with them because
Yeah.
how effed it up so bad is beyond me. Yeah. So let's just put it this way. Fraud's on the rise. There
Yep.
is a substantial amount of things that need to happen in the real estate space in general to prevent identity theft and land theft and home theft that we're not doing. And it happens every day.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
So,
We've gotten close a couple times to being in that situation, and the title companies rooted it out. And in fact, one time we were looking at buying a property at a suspiciously low price here in Dallas Fort Worth. It was a commercial lot that was worth, I don't remember, millions, and we were buying it for a couple 100,000. And we were like, this is super suspicious. Like, it was way too low of a price. We kind of asked and sussed it out. It was owned by this company. The person who brought it to us said over and over again, no, it makes sense because this company is going bankrupt and they're just selling all their assets as quickly as possible. And we were super suspicious the entire time, kept asking questions. And finally, when it came to the closing day, they were like, we're having to send the documents to Saudi Arabia. That's where the seller is located currently. And I was like, there's something's way, way wrong here. And I kept asking, I kept interrogating the title company. I was like, are you sure? Is this 100% safe? Da 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 da. How do you know this person? LLC documents and all this sort of stuff. And they swore up and down that this was going to go no problem, no problem. And then finally, when it came to the closing day, we sent the money in, and that person never signed, and we never ended up doing the transaction.
well, thank
Um,
God for that.
yeah,
Thank God for that. Yeah, we didn't learn till a week after we closed.
yeah.
It was a week too
Uh,
late.
we, we still did those. We filed a memorandum of land contract on that deal. So whoever, if that wasn't the owner, I don't know what's going on, but we might get a payday someday. We'll see. The
Yeah,
clouded title.
yeah, and I think those are interesting. It's a matter of what happens when they do come back.
Hmm.
If they have more money in their pockets, they might be able to throw it out pretty quick.
Yep.
So anyway,
Yep.
so that's the Santa Fe fiasco. And yeah, now every time we get someone, I'm like, have you verified everything? Because you can be wrong. And believe me, you can be wrong because everything was kosher except for the one thing where we switched middle with the title company. I'm like, it wasn't like they were going to their own title company. There's only like two or three in Santa Fe in total. So we went from one to another one. And had that one not worked, there's a third one. And if you got that one, you're done. I mean, that's it. So
That's crazy.
it wasn't like, hey, let's use my title company. It's some title company out of a different state and a different person that no one's ever heard of and isn't
Yeah.
registered in the, register of title companies out there. So, as far as what we did to, mitigate this going forward is trying to vet the seller as much as we can. Never, I don't care what the price is, never close without a title company. And we've done many transactions that way. I can't tell you how many times that could have happened and we would not have known. The
Yeah.
only reason that we knew that this was happening, the reason it was not their land or the land was not ours is because someone knew that the sign was in the ground and knew it wasn't supposed to be there. Now imagine if you bought a piece of land and no one was watching, it's out in the middle of nowhere. There's no sign, there's no one to tell you it's transferred, and all of a sudden it's now been purchased and resold again, and now you're the owner, like, what do I do now? And
What
I
a
see that in the news
mess.
all the time now. And so there's actually insurance companies now that are offering like a title insurance. I don't know what you want to, it's like they check your title from being transferred.
Yeah.
And if it
Title
is, they
lock or
step
something
in
they
to,
call it. Yeah.
title lock to come in and stop it from happening because in places like Florida, this sort of issues happens every day. This was kind of oddball because it was New Mexico, which is very the way they do things is very old school. But in places like Florida or where I'm in Colorado, everything is digital. You do digitized notaries, digitized paperwork. You have your, driver's license check. But the problem is that can be fake. In this situation, they faked the driver's license. So
Mm.
the steps that I'm seeing now that I think are absolutely beneficial are you need to do a Zoom call for a closing. You need to provide more than one form of identification. Give a passport, give your social security card, something that says, hey, I am who I say I am because I have something that you can't make. Okay, well, they can still fake it. At least it's an extra step. And then maybe there needs to be something at the title company or this is something I'm seeing in other states where they're like, if a deed does get filed, you get a piece of mail as the old owner that this has happened. So like
Yep.
I've seen that in California, I've seen that in Florida, where if a property gets transferred from one person to another, you get a letter sent by the district attorney for the county or the city where the property is located and says, hey, did you know that this property was sold? here are the parties that were involved. Here's the deed. Here's the, page number of that, or that uh, document number for the deed that was filed. If this is not familiar, please call this number and file a police report, file a report with the Department of, it's usually the district attorney's office, but they even put stuff on there like, here's the state Department of Justice number, because you need to
Yeah.
file these complaints to let them know that this fraud happened and that there needs to be an open investigation as to why it happened so it can be prevented again and they can catch the person, because chances are they're not doing this once. This
Yeah.
has happened
It,
multiple times.
yeah, and it having those extra steps and precautions is important. It can be annoying flipping land as much as we do because it has caused like the additional verification. Because I know all these title companies are getting continuing education on like how to identify scams, and it's usually like transactions that are happening quickly, so quick buy and a quick sell, and I'm like, that's all I do. So it's like our company, just by the
Yeah.
nature of what we do, is constantly throwing up red flags. So like it doesn't even matter. Like that's another
Yeah.
benefit of working in a single market. So let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
So first off, I have said this a lot, and I've never actually done it because we've always had people kind of bringing us deals. But I was like,
Hmm.
man, I bet there is a substantial amount of deals that are on market that you can, execute some forced appreciation strategies on, like subdividing or improving in some form or fashion, and make
Hmm.
good money. So it sounds like that's something you've gotten into, huh?
Yeah. So we did a lot of research in the states that we did business in before we picked a market, and our market's down the southeast. And I love the Sun Belt states. You got to deal with hurricane season, which is actively happening right now. We're about to get done with it. Supposedly November is the end of it, November 1st. But as far as picking a market, we decided, okay, where do we want to be where we can do what we want to do without having to go through 3, 6, 12 months of regulation. And so what you'll find in places like Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, not Georgia, but in that part, maybe even a little bit of Tennessee, you're going to find places and counties, jurisdictions where you can do exempt subdivides or do minor subdivides, and it's very, very nominal. You're talking about a survey, and that's it. May not even have to file it. You may have to file it, and they might have to put a rubber stamp on it. It says, yep, this meets the requirements of the jurisdictional requirements to subdivide for exempt or minor, or they may not have any regulations.
Yep.
And there are markets in all of those states where there are zero regulations.
Yep.
They may have statewide, like I'll give you an example. In Alabama, they might require 3-acre lots in order to meet the requirement for a septic system. So you can do as many lots as you want as long as they're all 3 acres or more. So if
Yep.
you have 30 acres, okay, we could do 10 lots as long as you got the road frontage that makes sense. Maybe they have lot width requirements. Maybe they have zero. Maybe it's just as long as they're 3 acres, you can make them skinny if you really want to. Not my recommendation, but maybe make them as useful as you can as long as they're that minimum requirement.
Yeah, exactly. And I really think that that's kind of where our flipping industry is moving in general. And actually, something I talk about a lot on this podcast for folks that just own land and they want to sell it, but they want the
Yeah.
highest return. Like, you become a professional by doing this over and over again and identifying but you can do this one time with your own property. Maybe it's something you've inherited. Um, yeah, call somebody like me, call someone like Seth and ask them like, hey, if I work with you, are you able to actually increase the value of this property? And this is something I highly suggest for folks that are interested in land banking as well. So if you are kind of sick of putting
Taylor.
your money in stock market and things like that, um, you want to invest in real estate, but homes are so expensive and all this sort of stuff, like you can go find land that's sitting on market with the potential for forced appreciation, whether through subdivision or clearing or whatever it might be. So it sounds like you're kind of cracking the code on this. Is there like what's the process, right? Are you just literally you're spending your whole day on Redfin or Zillow and you're shopping around, or do you have some brokers that are looking for you? What do you do here?
All the above, and then we have a team as well. So, if let's start with the people that are not in our space of flipping land. They're like, hey, I own the farm, and I could talk about the farm because we have a farm in our family. We just recently sold to a subdivision. Folks that are going vertical with it. Their land is great. At the end of the day, whether you're flipping it, you want to subdivide it, or you have had it in the family forever, there's a way to force the appreciation out of it today. And it doesn't require a rocket scientist, and I know one if you need one. So um, the reality is it's talking with the surveyor, talking with the county. So you're talking with planning and zoning to figure out what the rules and regulations are of the particular parcel that you own or the one that you're looking at. And then they might say, okay, it might be one of those, you've got to do the digging because they may not know. And I've run into that many, many times where they don't know the answer. So we got to go through the rules and like send me the PDF of your rules and regulations on subdividing in your county. There may be zero, which is why they don't know anything about it. Like, well, there is no rules. So you just do whatever you feel is best.
Yeah.
And I love those markets. They're the ones, usually red states at the end of the day is what they are.
Freedom
Um,
states.
yeah, but at the same time, if you're like, well, I don't know what I don't know, then call a surveyor. They can tell you straight up what it's probably going to end up being. They can also tell you the cost to do it and stuff. I would say on average, you're looking at $3,000 to $5,000 to subdivide something. And
Hmm.
we're talking like 10 lots or less, is more than likely what we're talking about on a minor or exempt subdivide. You could do more in some jurisdictions, but you're probably not wanting to make 20, 30 lots on a minor exempt. That's starting to push likely into a major subdivide. And at that point, we're talking serious dollars to put infrastructure and other things in.
Yeah,
Uh,
and there's good reason for that too, right? Like the county is not putting this process in just to extract wealth or anything like that. I mean, maybe in some areas, but for the logistics are is if you cut a property down and all of a sudden you have people moving to the, say you have 20, 30 lots and then you have 20 or 30 homes being put up and there's no, fire suppression available to the community or the roads there's no roads or the roads are only so wide that a single car can go down. How are they going to, it becomes a big safety issue. There's like a lot of
Absolutely.
liability that if you're going to operate in such a way where you're caring for the general population, then you want to ensure that there's proper infrastructure. So, um, now, for say you are just a homeowner or just a landowner, maybe it's something you
Yeah.
inherited. What is your process for determining? Like you have a 40-acre property. Are you going to cut that into four 10 acres or four or eight 5 acres? Or how do you look at a property and decide kind of its best subdivision potential?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at it at a high level, I love to use land ID. And even if you're an individual landowner, I'd recommend you can get it for free, I think, for even a free trial. But you can look up your property. Let's look at the road frontage. And this is stuff you probably know if you have owned it for a long time, inheriting it. You maybe went there as you were a kid. You're going to want to look at the road frontage. You want to look at the terrain. Do we actually have flat, usable area? We want to look at wetlands. We want to look at flood zone. We want to look at utilities to make sure that all these things are lining up to make sense to actually subdivide. Because I look at a lot of properties that are like 40 acres and they look fantastic on all of those fronts. And then I look at the terrain and I'm like, good God, there's like no flat spots. This whole
Yeah.
thing is like a lumpy piece of coal. There's just like little mounds and big mounds all over the place. So it's like if I split this up, sure, you could split it up, but does it make any sense to do that? So you want to look at that terrain, you want to look at the road frontage, utilities, wetlands, flood zone, and that'll make the determination at the high level of whether it even makes sense to do this. The second thing then is if you got good terrain, it's flat in some area, maybe you got some terrain in other areas, but you got some flat area, you got pretty good road frontage. What do you see in that market? Do you see 5 acre lots? Do you see 10 acre lots? Do you see smaller? Maybe you do a mix of stuff. Do 10 acres, do 5 acres, do some 2 acre lots. 2 to 3 acres is where you want to be if you're not on the sewage and water system. In some counties, you've got water and sewage lines going in front of the property. But if you don't have that, you need to be able to put a well and a septic on there at the end of the day if you're going to build something. So you want to make sure the size is appropriate for the market and that you can actually utilize the property in the future as a new owner of the property if you split it up. So if you're someone who's like, hey, I just inherited the 40-acre farm, okay, now the next question is, does this property make sense to subdivide into smaller farms? Does it make sense to make 4 10-acre farms? Or does it make sense to make, I don't know, 6 or 7 5 acre farms, 5 to 7 acres each? They're not going to be farmland after that. So I don't want to say you're destroying the land. It's not going to be farmable anymore. You know, there's small farming operations. You could say, well, we're going to take a house and we're going to have a garage. Maybe we do a business on here. Maybe we have like 3 to 4 acres of farmland.
Mhm.
It's perfectly reasonable if there's a market for it. And so working with a local professional that knows the market's going to be your best bet. But the other thing is to shop around. Like if you own land, shop it around with brokers, shop it around with people that are developing in the area because I'll just tell you the story of my family. We owned land that was first homesteaded in 1871. We bought it in the 1970s, and that's where I grew up. I grew up on the farm, and it was 300 acres. It got chopped up 3 times over the years to sell off to make money. You know, you gotta,
Yeah.
you can be rich and cash poor, and that's the situation. So we ended up selling off about 250 acres of it over time, and that freed up money. So that's
Mhm.
another way. It's like, okay, we own 300 acres. Well, okay, we need $20,000. Okay, slice off a portion and sell that. And I see that all the time on the market. Drives me nuts a little bit when I'm looking for stuff because you don't know what you're buying until you get 10 phone calls in. But as far as that's concerned, you could sell a small portion, or sell the whole thing off in smaller portions. But when we sold the farm, we didn't do any of that. We just negotiated with the builder who wanted to come in. And in our situation, this is what happens with a lot of farms is you ended up getting surrounded by development.
Yeah.
And our farm was farmland for as far as you could see. And when my grandparents purchased the farm with my uncle back in the 1970s, everyone thought they were crazy for buying this farm because it was just east of town of Fort Collins, which is now the second or third largest city in Colorado. And there was nothing out there. It was a farm. And they're like, that's what we wanted. We wanted a farm. We were not looking at this as a long-term investment to, be able to resell later. We just wanted a place to raise their girls, which is my mom and aunt. And over the years, things got sold off and the farm got smaller. But the reality is you fast forward 50 years from now there's nothing but houses around there. There's nothing but all these people that have moved into Colorado, there's so many of them. It's making this place a little less desirable. They're all
Yeah.
moving here, and it's like, okay, we got one farm and there's nothing but houses around it. There is really no reason to keep the farm because it's not what it was before. It's now got to go on to its next journey. And so we sold it off to Hartford Homes. It's a local Northern Colorado builder, and it's going to be 160 homes now on the 40 or so acres that was left. And they're keeping the barn that was built in 1871 on our property, and they have named the streets after the people that have owned the property since 1871, including our family, Drehle, and then they named one of the streets after my grandpa, Dutch. So if you find the right builder, they're out there, and they will work with you to make the legacy of what the farm was come to life. Not all of them are like that. If you work with D.R. Horton, I don't know, maybe it's just the money thing. I mean, at the end of the day, it was, keeping the memories alive. It was money and the fact that the farm was no longer useful in its current state. And a lot of people that they like to piss on the developer. But I'll be honest with you, if you just inherited land, maybe that's a good option because you will get a higher payout because they want it. It's highly desirable. But on
Yeah.
top of that, they can do other things that might make you happy because this is kind of, I'm at the beginning of my journey in life. My grandparents are towards the end of their journey in life, and there's only a few things left that they're like, I want to do this. And one of them was preserving their name because my brother and I have a hyphenated name. Everyone asks about it because they're like, that's kind of weird. You guys have a hyphenated name. Like, the problem is we're the last Dreles. My
Oh,
father
wow.
is Ewan. And so we got hyphenated Drehle because without that, we're the last Dreles. There's Von Dreles all over the place, but there's no Dreles left. We're the last two. And
So you got to
so
go
he
make some
doesn't want
Dreles.
to, so yeah, he wanted to have something named after the family, and that was what we did. And then we got a surprise. They decided to name one of the streets after him. So
Man, that's really cool. Yeah, that's one of the things that I really like about land in general is like, yes, I see it as a smart financial decision. I see it as the opportunity for our business. I see it as like, um, I also see it as this like beautiful aspect of life. I mean, there's no human that doesn't exist on land. It's so foundational to every aspect of our life. And everywhere, it's kind of a testament to like human imagination, right? It's like all the way. I'm also kind of fascinated with like ancient construction. I don't know if you've seen some of the new
Oh
shows on
yeah, I am
Netflix,
too.
but
It's
yeah,
fun.
yeah. So you go
The new
see
season
like,
coming out, I think, of
oh, I know, yeah, I've been
ancient
watching it.
civilization or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but it's like the same thing. It's like we take the land and we try to just put a little bit of our whole life into this thing, whether it's building a certain object or designing a certain thing or having something named after yourself. And it is kind of beautiful. It gives you the opportunity to pay testament to somebody whose life is so fleeting, but the land is forever. So it's just another one of those like romantic concepts to the whole idea of owning land that it is non-trivial to me. I think it's really important. And it's something that
Yeah.
you deal with a lot when you're in the business of buying land because most of the time you're buying land and you're hearing a story or you're buying land and you're learning about this family that owned it for 100 years or the family before that family or it used to be this and then it used to be that and like my wife can attest to this, but I used to have to set a timer whenever I would talk to land sellers because I would get so fascinated in the history of their property that I'd be like, 45 minutes in and you're haunted. What out there?
Yeah.
Um, so it's really beautiful. I don't know. It kind of speaks to humanity and it allows you to um, also have a vision of what you might do there with your family someday. So I don't know. That's really
Exactly.
cool. And it's so we talked about, all right, so this is how we're going to look at a property and we're going to decide how we're going to divide it up. And I think a lot of the time it's kind of like spitballing, right? You might take a property, and if you're going to decide, well, maybe let's see what it looks like if we cut it into 5 acre lots. And you just get a picture of it and you kind of start drawing and doodling, or you talk to a surveyor and he'll draw and doodle and you effectively come up with a concept plan, right? And
Yep.
that's really step one is you get this concept plan and then you hand it to a surveyor. And one of the things that we do is we always send it to the county. And typically, depending on how rural you are, like sometimes that county is just like four people, like there may not be a big governmental structure there.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
in some of the areas we worked at, actually one I may have mentioned this before, but I remember I was trying to call a county precinct officer, I forget what they're called, councilman here in Texas, and I was trying to find his number online, and it listed his home phone number, and then below it listed his barn phone number. So I had to,
Okay.
yeah, so I called his
That's
house
fun.
first, no answer, called the barn, and that's how I got a hold of him. So it's like, um, the governmental structure here can be pretty lax, it can be pretty weak. And that gives us a
Yeah.
lot of freedom to just kind of, but anyways, you want to put it in front of them either way. You do want some government official to say, yes, this is exempt. You don't have to go through any official process. You do want that recorded somewhere, because sometimes
Exactly.
these county officials don't talk, right? So you may have had a councilman that said that's no problem. You do the subdivision, you get the surveyor, and then you send it over to the appraisal district. And the appraisal district's like, I can't give you APNs until you demonstrate that you've been through this process or whatever. So, um,
Exactly.
I always try to make sure that we have some sort of evidence from the county, something documented, written, signed. Usually there's like minutes, like they'll do a meeting once a month or something like that. And that's the most ideal, even if it's exempt, is to get it in front of the city council or the county meeting and get them to stamp and add the minutes to it and as if at all possible, try to have some sort of documentation that the county signed off on it. Um,
Exactly.
and then what? You have this concept plan, you hand it to the surveyor. What does the surveyor do?
Well, so we usually have it concepted out already because we use Land ID to go ahead and draw the property out. But if you're like, hey, I don't know what's good, you just give them your property and say, hey, I'm thinking about lots that are let's say 3 to 5 acres, 3 to 10 acres. Go and make some lots that you think would be useful. And when I say useful, I mean width-wise, length-wise, road frontage-wise, like in terms of terrain, making sure you're incorporating that in. And at the end of the day, the surveyor will draw it out for you if you want them to. I will tell you, sometimes they'll charge a fee just to do concept drawings.
Hmm.
So if you're like, hey, I don't want to do anything, I'll just let them do it. Just be prepared to pay a little bit more. If you're like, I know what I want, you can draw it out on a piece of paper. Just print it out. Draw on there with a pen or pencil, hand it to them and say, hey, what do you think? And they're like, yep, this looks good. I think this would meet the requirements. And usually if you're looking at those exempt or minor, you're looking at the lot width, the lot length, and the road frontage. And those three things are usually the and as long as you have the, lot width, lot length, and then size, as long as those lots are conforming to that, then it's a matter of, okay, we have the right width and length Does that also meet the right requirement for the frontage on the road that's maintained by the county or city? Because at the end of the day, they're going to want to see public road access. They don't want to see landlocked properties, and you don't want that at the end of the day because
Yeah.
landlocked properties are much harder to sell. So hopefully you've got enough acreage where you've got road frontage. That's the first part to this. And unfortunately, there's a lot of properties out there that don't. My first thing would be get access before you try to sell it. If you're someone who's inheriting land or you're someone that's buying land, make sure you've got that access in there first because it's going to dramatically increase the value to an end buyer.
Yeah, and there's some states that even have like it's illegal to have no access to land. So you'll
Yeah,
have a process by which you can gain access to any land. Um,
exactly.
and it's not terribly difficult, though it can be long. But one thing I do like to mention is just kind of like transparency. So if somebody's going to get concept plan drawn up by a surveyor, usually that's going to run you like 500 to 1,500 bucks, depending on how complex it is. It's not super expensive, but the surveyor's not going to waste his time. He's going to make sure he charges for it. Um, and then a
Yep.
survey itself, what does that look like? What does the survey usually run you? Say you're doing like a 40-acre property and you're cutting that up into four. What does that usually look like?
Yeah, it depends on the place, but a lot of times it's in the $3,000 to $5,000 range, and that's for anywhere from I'm not gonna say a single lot split, probably 3 to 4 lots to 10 lots. And our average on all of them, because we usually do about 10 lots, is about $5,000.
Hmm.
And this isn't going to apply to someone who's doing this on a one-off thing. If you're doing this over and over, you can use the same surveyor and they're going to start
Yep.
giving you discounts. Same thing with your title companies, same thing
Hmm.
with your perk test people. Like you start giving them business, it starts to repeat itself. They're like, okay, I remember Seth. Yeah, every time I do a deal, he wants to use me. So I'm going to give him a discount on this one because I like him. But if you're just doing a one-off thing, make sure you shop it around because the thing that you'll find is the surveyor that doesn't want to do it will give you an outrageous quote and an outrageous timeline. And the one that really wants it will give you a decent quote and a decent timeline. And when I say decent, we're talking low, like the lowest amount of time I've ever seen something is 2 weeks and like $2,000. And the most on the same property I've seen it is like $15,000 and 16 weeks to get it done. And I'm like, clearly they don't want the work. And if they do, they want you to wait and they want you to pay out the yin yang to get their
Yeah.
work done. So, I always try to get 3 quotes unless I'm comfortable. Like I'm at this point with a property, if I look at it, I'm like, okay, it's $4,000. I know that's a good quote. Maybe we could get $1,000 less over here. Maybe it'd be $1,000 more over there. If I feel good with the quote, I'll go with it. But if you're doing this on a one-off thing, make sure you get 3 to 5 people to go and check it out because the surveyors that are in the county, there might be only one or two, unless it's a very highly populated county. But the neighboring counties, if you're talking one core county and you go to the surrounding ones, they might be willing to travel in. And so if you
Hmm.
did that, you might have another 5 or 6 surveyors that you could contact to get a quote, and they will give you a quote for free. And at the end of the day, you want to make sure you're getting the best person for the best price. Um, and if you're looking at 5 or 6 quotes, you're going to realize very quickly half are going to go in the trash, and the other half you can now have to decide which one you want to go with.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, like sometimes the price per survey is just dependent on like if the property's cleared or not. Like if you go get a survey price for something that is like difficult to walk through. I mean that's miserable because like that's what the surveyor has to do. They have to go out there and get to that corner of the property. So the bigger the property, the more difficult terrain, the more expensive it's going to be. Because ultimately they get to a corner and they drop a stake and it's not as bad. The other reason it could be very expensive is if there is boundary disputes of any sort. And we're dealing with this right now where we have a property in, I don't even know where it is, North Carolina, I think, one of our funding deals. And we went to go sell it, had it under contract, people liked it. And then the title company that we actually bought it through, talk about crappy, um, that we bought it and it didn't come up. But on the sales side, all of a sudden we have people we're selling it to, and they identify this boundary dispute at the closing table. So we're like, what the heck? So now we have to bring in a surveyor. And I had an episode earlier where we talk about like the job of a surveyor, and it's actually a bizarre and kind of complex job because yeah, you're out in the field and you're marking corners, but you're also settling disputes like this. Like, where is the boundary of this land? So a lot of
Yep.
the time, the surveyor has to go be a researcher. He's got to hold himself up. He's got to look at the entire history of the project and get out in the field. And there's a lot of work that goes into it. So if somebody's settling a boundary dispute, that can also be pretty expensive. Um,
Yeah.
and
I've
yeah,
I've had that happen more than once. And at the end of the
hmm
day, you have to decide, is it worth bothering with it if the acreage that's being disputed is nominal?
yeah,
If you're someone who's owned the land forever, you're like, oh God, we've been using that forever, we should have that. Then ask yourself, okay, if it's like zero point 0.5 acres and you're dealing with 40 acres, is the zero point 0.5 acres and moving the fence or moving whatever the boundary is worth $25,000 in legal fees
yeah,
and a year or two of legal battles?
and a hostile neighbor.
Or or do you just concede the half acre and just say, you know what, it is what it is on this one? And that's
Mhm.
what we've done on a couple deals because we're like, okay, well, the fence got moved here. Well, on the neighbor's fence, it's actually in, so we could claim it over there if they ever surveyed it. So when we get those boundary surveys, you're always, when you're doing that subdivide survey, you're doing two. You're doing the subdivide survey and the
Hmm.
boundary or meets and bounds survey. The meets and bounds is going to find that boundary dispute, and it may or may not be a dispute that's worth fighting. And
Hmm.
so, if you've owned the land forever, you may have an emotional attachment, maybe not to every square inch, but to the property as it is. And now you're getting new information. You're like, you've got to be kidding me. We've owned this for 50 years and that's not ours. It can be alarming. At the same time, you got to look at it from a money perspective. If you're trying to just sell it now, is it worth fighting over the half acre? Or is it worth just conceding the acreage and calling it good? Because the
Hmm.
survey itself is going to cost more than the than the amount of the acreage in most situations. Like, we're not talking $500,000 an acre. If you're dealing with something where the dispute and the cost of the survey is less than the value of the acreage, then maybe it's worth fighting. But if
Yeah.
it's the other way where the acreage is worth less than all of that combined, it probably isn't worth fighting at the end of the day.
Right, yeah. And then it's also just timeline too. It can slow everything down. Time is money. But yeah, anyways, the full cycle is so we got the concept plan. We took it to the surveyor. The surveyor cut it up and gave us back another paper that has all the stuff on it. That's going to be your master survey. And
Yep.
usually I have them draw up the individual surveys as well. So you'll have like a master survey and then a survey of lot one, lot two, lot three, whatever.
Yep.
Um, and then what do? You go to the appraisal district, right? You have to get some tax IDs, and then you bring it to market. So
Yep.
a lot of people, you can sell it yourself, you can sell it to a broker, but I guess we didn't really fully explain why do any of this, right? Okay, what's the
Yeah.
difference between me selling a 40-acre lot and four 10-acre lots? Is there really much of an advantage to the whole process you're putting me through? Can you kind of maybe give us some rough numbers on why this is advantageous?
Yeah. So if you were looking at a 40 acre, let's say let's use some round numbers. Let's say that the 40 acre is worth $2,000 an acre. So you're talking $80,000 for the 40 acre parcel. Now you want to do four 10-acre lots. It's like this is where you get into experts in the area that know the market, know the value per acre, and we're talking on a price per acre basis. You're talking probably a 2 to 3 multiple higher than that 40-acre parcel. So we're probably looking on a 10-acre parcel in the five, this is just an example I'm giving you, probably
Mhm.
looking at $5,000 to $6,000 an acre versus $2,000 an acre as a 40-acre parcel. Make them smaller. Let's say we went 5 acres or 3 acres, we might be looking at $7,000 to $8,000 an acre. And it's just the way it goes. If you're buying, let's use like the John Dutton Ranch. They're buying they got an offer on that show for like $10,000 an acre on their behemoth of like 1 million acres. But then when they go and they build the houses and those lots get done, those lots are worth $300,000 an acre.
Mhm.
And so it just shows you the vast difference between large acreage and smaller. And in any market you go to, the smaller the acreage, the more value per acre. The more acreage, the more valuable, but the less value per acre. So, if you're looking, this is what I always get with people. They're like, oh, it's $400,000. But I'm like, but what is it per acre? Oh, it's $1,000 an acre. I'm like, well, that's great. You have 400 acres. Now go find me a parcel that's $400,000 for an acre. And sure enough, you're going to find one in the same state that's $400,000 for 1 acre. So you always got to look at both ends of the coin. What is the objective here? And if you already own the land, it is what it is at this point. The market's going to tell you what they're going to bear. But if you want more, this is a simple way to go ahead and unlock that value for a very nominal amount of money. We're talking a few
Hmm.
$1,000s for the survey and a little bit of time. We're not talking a serious amount of time in most of these places. We're talking about exempts, maybe a month in terms of survey wait time and any other paperwork that needs to be done.
Yep. Yeah, and I really that's kind of where that's what you're really trying to determine is like what's the sweet spot there between um, the smaller you subdivide it, the more money you're going to make. That's why, if you're driving around in Dallas and you're looking at these zero lot limit homes, that's why. It's because the value of that land is so high. So the smaller you go, obviously, the more money you're going to make, but the more complicated it gets, the smaller you go, the more money you have to put in, the smaller you go. Um, but the other thing that you really benefit from when you take a 40-acre lot and then you cut it into 10 or 5 or 3-acre lots is you're usually also encountering a much bigger buyer pool because these lots are at a lower price point per unit, though they're a higher price point per acre. So maybe you have a 40-acre ranch or a 40-acre property and you're trying to sell that. Well, $80,000 maybe in that community or whatever. Not a lot of people have that, right? But they do need
Absolutely.
a place for a home. So you cut it down, and all of a sudden you have affordable home sites. Um, and we can go
Exactly.
obviously way in depth into how to do this. And really, the pros are going to do much more than that sometimes. Like, for example, you may put roads and, cut home sites and not be as afraid of some of these capital expenditures. And then the real pros who are doing like master plan subdivisions, obviously, that's just a whole nother ball game. But yeah, this is something that a lot of people don't know. Um, you can make a substantial amount of money by subdividing it, but also like you mentioned that your family did, you can also kind of titrate the sale, right? So if you cut it up into 4 lots, but you only really want to sell one of them right now, you can just keep 3 lots, right? And you can sell one lot because maybe you have a specific financial burden that you need to pay for, or whatever it might be, or you want to go on a vacation or something along those lines. Um, so that's another
Exactly.
benefit, especially, if you're land banking, that's one of the questions that I get asked a lot is like, well, what if I put $200,000 into a piece of land, and yeah, maybe in a few years it's worth $230,000 or $250,000. But what if I need $20,000 or $30,000? And this is something that you can do. You can take a piece of property and subdivide it the way that you think you want to sell it, and then just sell it as you want, right? And the longer you hold on to it, probably in a lot of markets, it's going to appraise. So you'll end up making more money over the course of time, longer you hold on to it. But there's no problem with subdividing it and then selling it later. So we've actually talked about
Exactly.
this a lot in our business. Is like, okay, we're in a buyer's market right now. Like, how can I whip together a bunch of money to buy a lot of land right now, and then just do like a subdivision every year instead of always going to
Exactly.
market and being in this acquisition disposition cycle? Why can't I just have 10, and just sort through my deeds and pick the one I want to subdivide this year? Um,
Exactly. Well, and I'll say this on the land flipping side of things, it's become a lot less stressful having to pick properties off the market because I don't have to shoot at everything. And I love Warren Buffett. I love Charlie Munger, and bless him, passing away this year. But that's my favorite investment style is just value investing. And you can value invest in anything, and we value invest in land. When we buy something, we're usually looking at a minimum net return of 100%. But if you've owned the land forever, you might be looking at a target return on total investment in the millions percentiles. I
mhm.
mean, I could give you another example in our family where we bought land for $1 back in the 1940s, and we still own it. It's got our family cabin on it, and I don't even know what it's worth today, but it's worth substantially more than $1 an acre now.
Probably a few
And
bucks, yeah.
yeah, probably a few bucks. And so if you own the land forever and you're willing to let it go, you're probably talking substantial returns. And that's where you want to get people that know more about taxes and legalities to make sure you're doing things the right way when you're transferring it. If you want to keep one but not keep others, there's all kinds of things you need to have in your tool chest to make sure you're doing it the right way and not getting taxed on it at the end of the day. And that's just something you learn over time. The tax man will come around when you got land, and
The
whether
tax
it's
man
from
will come
property
in.
tax or whether it's when you're selling it for capital gains.
Yeah.
And we recently learned that with the farm sale, and that's something a lot of people out there that have farms are contemplating. They're like, you get the big bad wolf of the developer on this side, which is what most people say, oh, the farmland's getting destroyed. And where I live, that's basically what's happening. All the farmland's getting gobbled up because there's this serious demand for people to have homes. And the home supply is very limited here, but the demand is extremely high.
Yeah.
And so these farms are getting gobbled up and the old traditional ways are going away. But the farm families that are no longer farming are benefiting substantially from these developers coming in. So, if you own that land, keep it for 50 years. If that's what you want to do, enjoy it. But realize there's going to be an exit at some point. It may not be by you, it might be by your grandchildren or whoever is going to inherit that land. Make sure you have a family plan for the property because it may not sit for 100 years. It might sit for
Mhm.
20 years, might sit for 30 years, but there's going to come a time when someone says, I don't want it anymore. And you don't want to get a letter from Logan and just say, oh, I'll take whatever Logan has for me.
Yeah,
Always
I was gonna
explore your
say, if you're in that situation where you're like, "Ah, we have this land and I don't know what to do with it, just call me. Okay, I'll help you with that
options.
problem." Um, well, cool. We're at an hour. I think let's wrap. But the one thing that I think, folks, if you do want to reach out to Seth, I'll give you an opportunity to put some info here. But
Yeah,
another key aspect of subdividing land is owner financing. Um, and that's its own
sure,
topic. I'm sure we could go in depth on that as well, but that's like hand in glove for what we're doing. You know, you subdivide land, you sell some of it cash, but that owner financing allows you to take, instead of making it one big transaction, one big splash of money, you can actually make like 8 to 10, even longer, 10-year loans on your own land that pay you monthly. And that is a big deal. It gives you top dollar, it titrates, it gives you deferred revenue, all sorts of good stuff. So,
for sure.
well, that being said, Seth, how can people reach out to you? What do you want them to engage with for you?
Yeah, if you guys want to reach out, you can follow me on TikTok at the Seth Drehle-Ewan. I have some other channels, but that's where I'm most active right now. And my email address is on there too, so you can reach out directly to me.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm gonna have to download TikTok again. I have to go check out your content. I forget I have a decent audience on TikTok we do nothing with, so I should probably start using that again. Well, Seth, thank you for your time. Really appreciate having you on. I'd love to have you back again one of these days. Um, Folks, if you are interested in buying or selling land, go to primelandexchange.com. Check us out. I can help you list and sell your land. If you are looking to buy land, now's the time. What did Seth just say? We're in a buyer's market. So it's the best time to go spend a bunch of your hard-earned cashola on land. If you have your own properties that you're looking to develop, subdivide, you want somebody who can maybe help you along in the process or partner with you or whatever, reach out to me at thelandfixer.com. And then, folks, it's been a pleasure. We love you. We hope to talk to you again soon. Remember, like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.